hello, and welcome and happy Hump Day. It's This Is Going Well, I Think, with David Cooper. I am David Cooper. It's This Is Going Well, I Think, the show where no one's listening, no one cares. The show where every episode's the last episode. Today, a great lineup. In about 10 minutes' time, we are going to talk to someone who climbed Mount Denali in Alaska. That is North America's highest and most treacherous peak. And her story is one of triumph, of personal sacrifice. It's a compelling tale. And to top it off, she's an astrobiologist. Oh, and remember earlier in the week when we covered that story about those mean monkeys that were always fighting, who found themselves affected by Hurricane Maria, and then afterwards, they started getting along? Well, we'll talk to a researcher who looked into all of that and talk macaque monkeys with her. And yes, I just wanted to say macaque. And it's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. Therapist Gary Direnfeld and I are going to discuss aging and also spanking. Should you spank your kids? No, but Gary's going to give a take on why you shouldn't. Oh, and finally, a disaster has occurred where our foreign correspondent, Tony 5, lives in England. Tony's going to try his best to call in. He's barely got phone charge left. That's how bad things have gotten. And he'll do some live reporting in a small suburb of London where they've completely lost power. Ooh, that is just some of the great stuff we have for you during this show. And I'm looking forward to you listening to it. But first, this. And now an update from the world of Danish dairy drama. Denmark is about to become the first country to tax farmers for their livestock's farts. That's right, their gassy contributions starting in 2030. Cows, sheep, and pigs may well be facing a fart tax. If they did this for humans, I might well be bankrupt as a lifelong IBS sufferer, but I digress. Now, the Danish government, in its infinite wisdom, has decided that every ton of carbon dioxide from our four-legged methane factory friends will cost farmers 300 kroner, which is about $40-50. And by 2035, that price will skyrocket to 750 kroner, about $100. But I gotta say, there will be a tax deduction, so the actual cost may well be a bit lower. However, the taxation minister of Denmark says this is all part of the country's grand plan to become climate neutral by 2045. Because nothing says saving the planet like taxing a cow for enjoying its lunch. Denmark's got about 1.48 million cows, each of them burping and farting out a whopping 6 metric tons of carbon dioxide a year. And cows are, by far, the biggest culprit. It is a bovine gas attack. And cows release most of their methane through burps, farts, and of course, manure. Manure, not a bad word at all.
It's just horse manure. Horse manure is not that bad. I don't even mind the word manure. It's nua, which is good, and a ma in front of it. Manure. I mean, when you consider the other choices, manure is actually pretty refreshing.
Thanks, George. Anyway, the goal here is to reduce Denmark's greenhouse gas emissions by 70% from the 1990 levels, all of that by 2030. Sounds noble, right? But let's be honest, this might just be a clever way to make us pay more for Danish bacon. Cow bacon, that is. Now, the tax is still awaiting the stamp of approval from that country's parliament, but it looks like a sure thing at this point. Meanwhile, New Zealand had a very similar plan, but it scrapped it after their farmers protested. Maybe those New Zealand farmers didn't want to tell their livestock to put a cork in it. So there you have it. Denmark is breaking ground with a new tax. Just another day in the life of a farmer, eh? But they've got to draw the line there. They can't start taxing us for farting. Can they? Here's a wild one about a breakup that got more legal action than a courtroom drama. Here's what happened. A woman in New Zealand decided to sue her boyfriend after he bailed on taking her to the airport. I mean, sure, it's a lot to ask. And nobody loves sitting in traffic to get someone to the airport. But suing over it? Outrageous, egregious, preposterous.
It's outrageous, egregious, preposterous.
Thanks, Jackie. The woman in the couple, who's keeping her name under wraps, probably because she doesn't want to be known as a person who sued over an airport ride, claimed that she and her boyfriend had a verbal contract. Yeah, because those always hold up in court, right? She was supposed to catch a flight for a concert and leave her dogs with him. But guess what? He didn't show. He bailed. So the poor woman ends up missing her flight, and she's got to pay for another day of travel, a shuttle, and kennel fees for her dogs. She wants the money back. Oh, and she also wants him to pay for a ferry trip that they had planned on taking together. This lady was trying to get money back for a future trip after he flaked on one. The tribunal that heard her case, who all must have had the patience of saints, dismissed it. Of course. Someone from the tribunal explained that for a promise to be enforceable, there needs to be an intention to create a legally binding relationship between the two parties. Apparently, these two lovebirds were just doing the normal give and take that couples do. And let's be honest, none of us expect to take our partners to court for breaking a promise. Unless, of course, that promise is to be married forever, in which case, that's most court battles, right? Divorce? A spokesperson for the tribunal pointed out that friends, partners, and colleagues must make social arrangements all the time, but that doesn't mean you can sue if the people you make the arrangements with flake. That is, unless you've got a signed document, you're out of luck. When your friends let you down, you might lose some money, but good luck getting compensated for that specific loss. It's safe to say the couple have parted ways. There might have been awkwardness at the dinner table had they not. And get this, the ex-boyfriend didn't even bother to show up for the tribunal hearing or answer follow-up calls. He ghosted on the court case like he ghosted on the airport ride. And honestly, if this guy wasn't such a flake, I'd say he was amazing. Or at least that he's got commitment issues. So the next time someone asks you for a ride, make sure you got a lawyer present. Or just, I don't know, if they don't show, call a cab. Get ready to be tickled with this story. It's a surprising twist from a university medical center in Germany. Apparently, a quarter of people in a study claimed that they've had an orgasm from being tickled. Yes, tickling isn't just for giggles anymore. Now, this study wasn't about the usual laughs and playful pokes. In it, they surveyed 719 people with a tickling fetish to see if tickling could get more than just a laugh. And guess what? For a quarter of them, it did. For those people, climaxing occurred without even touching their more traditional areas. But before you start looking at your feather duster in a whole new raunchy way, let us dive into some details. A researcher on the team discovered that many of these tickling enthusiasts had childhood experience with tickling, like those tickle fights in cartoons. Apparently, this led them down to some very specific path of adult pleasure. And this does not surprise me. The same thing occurs. If you play under the table with a bunch of feet, you might end up having a foot fetish. Anyway, researchers are now suggesting that we need to rethink how we understand sexuality. Turns out the things that can get us off are way more varied than we ever thought. Tickling, they say, is an intimate act that requires trust, but in the right environment, can be quite the sexual outlet. So what's next for the people doing this study and their merry band of tickle researchers? They are planning on looking deeper into how tickling triggers sexual pleasure. And this study could pave the way for more exploration into the wild world of human sexuality. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. While several people in the study all had a tickling fetish, we still don't know if your average Joe can tickle their way into ecstasy. That is, it may not work for you. But the next time someone asks you, ticklish, you might end up with a more complicated answer than you thought you'd give. So, keep the tickling feathers clean and consensual. Tickle fight! In a moment's time, we're going to have an astrobiologist on, but we're going to talk about something a little cooler than astrobiology, and I mean that literally. Cold because it's on top of a mountain. Except astrobiology includes astronomy, and astronomy includes planets, and there's probably a lot of planets that are cooler than Earth. But no matter, the person we're going to talk to next is going to tell us all about climbing North America's highest and most treacherous peak, Mount Denali in Alaska. Her story's a compelling one and involves a little bit of tragedy and a lot of excitement along the way, so don't change that dial every time I say that. Have you ever wanted to climb a mountain or at least have someone tell you what it's like because you're too scared? That's me. We're here with astrobiologist Professor Sarah Rugheimer, who works at York University. She's the author of Searching for Extraterrestrial Life. That's an Audible original, available on audible.com. Sarah, welcome, and I'm excited to talk about mountains and not astrobiology.
Yes, it's not usual that I'm invited to talk about my mountaineering exploits, but I'm very excited you heard about it.
But regardless, I do love your job. Like, I feel like that's the job I should start lying to people that I have. I usually say I'm a freelance foam salesman. Sometimes I say I'm the crown prince of Tajikistan, which is actually a republic, so it makes no sense. I've told people I'm a professor of quantum gastronomy, which I don't think is a field. But your field is just so amazing. It's like worth telling people I do. But I guess I can't because it's a real thing.
I mean, I don't know. My friend, who's also an astrophysicist, she would lie to people and say she was a nutrition major because she didn't want the questions. So people lie for different reasons.
When I told my grandfather I was studying like computer science, and I did like Turing machines and like, I don't know, like I never really learned how to code until I graduated. This is my former career before I decided to be a broadcaster for reasons that still elude my mother. But my grandfather took that as, okay, I now know how to fix his printer. And, you know, baby boomers and what's the generation older than them? They love to print, dude. They love printing.
I mean, I still love a good printer, but I also hate working with, like, they break and are incredibly annoying. And even though I can program computers, I cannot fix a printer.
Me too. It's like, if you need help designing a database system, I'm your guy. But like, I don't know how to fix a printer. That's hard.
It's orthogonal. It's an orthogonal skill set, have nothing to do with it. Same with mountaineering and astrophysicists. I don't think there's a lot of training that overlaps between the two other than the willingness to endure hard things.
Do something that is just not, you know, most rational people would never do.
Exactly. Maybe that's the link.
Which brings us to your climb of Mount Denali in Alaska. Mount Denali in Alaska. It's my accent. I don't know what it is anymore. I grew up in Canada. Now I live in the U.S. I used to say pasta. Now I say pasta. Not important. People may know it as its former name, Mount McKinley. Let's start here. What possessed you to climb the highest mountain in North America?
Yeah, it is. It's 20,310 feet. It's colder than the Himalayas, colder than Everest often. And people also say it's more difficult than Everest because you have to carry your own stuff. On Everest, people usually use Sherpas and support, but Denali is a national park in the US. You're not allowed to have that kind of support. You have to, every climber on the mountain has to be able to carry all their own stuff, which is around 120 pounds of gear. So it's a lot. It's a lot.
You're rocking a 120-pound pack?
Yeah, I'm very fit. You can't tell over the radio, but it's an intense climb. Like this isn't it isn't easy, shall we say. You're carrying a lot of gear. Temperatures get down routinely to the -40 at the summit. The cold is frigid. In fact, when we checked in with the National Park Service in May, or like May 26th, they said 50% of the climbers that had come down so far had frostbite. And indeed, a couple people on our team got frostbite. So it is an intense climb. Let's talk about it.
Yes. I'm like, oh my goodness. This is something you worked up to? You didn't just like climb the stairs of your building and then next day I'm going up Denali. Exactly.
No, you start with other mountains. So Denali was kind of a long-term plan. It's always been kind of the hardest mountain I planned to climb. I started mountaineering in 2011 after I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and I went on a climb up Kilimanjaro of people with MS, and that was like my first taste of high altitude. Kilimanjaro is an easy hike. It's not difficult other than the altitude. But that's kind of what got me into it. I wanted to do something more physically difficult than I would have done had I not been diagnosed with MS. And it's been a good way to keep fit, keep strong, and it honestly helps a lot of my symptoms. Just that kind of level of exercise has kept most of them at bay. When I'm training for a big mountain, I'm faring a lot better MS-wise versus when I'm not.
I don't even know what to say. I'm sitting here. I guess people can't see it. My jaw is dropped. The level of physical fitness, the MS, it's amazing. Okay, so you do Kilimanjaro, which you claim is quote unquote easy. You're talking to somebody who I don't even want to walk to the bodega to get, I don't know, water. Right.
I mean, we could get you up Kilimanjaro with a 6 months to a year of training, I am sure. We could do it, and you would have a fun time. There's hot food prepared. It's like the posh form of, I don't even call it mountaineering. It's the posh form of hiking. There's a cook tent. People bring up kind of a portable latrine. That's not the case on Denali. You are, pardon my language, shitting into a bag, half the time, or into a can on Denali, and you carry all that out.
Into a can? Why a can? I've never even heard a can.
Yeah, there's these clean mountain cans that you have to bring. So every team has to, carry everything out. So you have, sadly, a communal can that you're bringing to every, you have 12 of them or something like that. And you all go in it and until it's filled, and then you use the next one, and you have to bring that out. It's not romantic, this is
It sounds romantic. I'm picturing Lady and the Tramp with the spaghetti, I don't know, and the music in the background, and then just after the beautiful meal you go poop in a can. My girlfriend could never do this. She needs a home base. She needs to poop at home. She's got shy pooping syndrome.
Yeah.
So she's out, but I guess I could maybe do it.
I mean, you get over it. You get over it. No one likes it. That's no one's favorite part of the climb, but truly it's the most beautiful place I've ever been on this planet. The mountain range is incredible. You're on a rope team because there's crevasses everywhere for 21 days. You're on snow and ice for 21 days on a rope team. Life gets really simple. You can only focus on eating, sleeping, walking, breathing, and it's a hardcore reset from daily life.
Let's talk about the difficulty here and the danger, because I wish I knew the stats. I'm just going to pull them out of my rear end. But I know some huge percentage of people who attempt Everest, they either don't make it all the way or they die. I think a huge number just turns back to avoid that death. Some people go regardless of weather conditions. Is it that treacherous? Would you describe it as that dangerous? Was there serious risk involved?
There is risk, but it's not as risky as the Himalayas, where the peaks that are over 8,000 meters all carry with them a much higher substantial risk of high altitude sickness, cerebral edema, pulmonary edema. So those mountains tend to have I think Everest is around 1 to 5% death rate now. Which is down from where it was before. Other high altitude peaks in the Himalayas have an even higher death rate. Denali used to be higher, and it's again come down over time. It's around a 0.3 to 0.5% death rate. That does mean it happens, and unfortunately, I tried climbing Denali 2 years ago, and we had someone die on our team.
Wow.
So I've also experienced that up close and personal. That was a heart attack, death due to a heart attack at 20,000 feet. We were right below the summit, about 45 minutes from the summit. So you do have the risk of death. We also had someone who had to get helicopter rescued from our team who got cerebral edema. So there is risk. But usually, out of say 1,000 climbers, roughly, so far 2 have died on Denali this year. It's not as common of an occurrence, say, as Everest, but it's not uncommon, which is why my mom was worried.
Yes.
My friends were worried. They were checking the updates. My fiance, I don't think worried that much, but he's pretty relaxed. Good for him, because we're getting married in 2 weeks, and it would have been unfortunate had I had a worse outcome, on this climb.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you made it. So you tried 2 years ago. Conditions were such that you had to turn back?
Because we had the death on our team.
I see.
So once you have, even though it's a heart attack, there's not much you can do about that. The risk of something else happening after you have a tragedy is much higher. So everyone has to come back. So that's what ended that climb. And so partly I wanted to go back in honor of my, prior teammate. I left a photo of him at the summit, and still had that urge to go back. Again, my mom freaking out that I decided to return, given that prior history.
I think my mom's worrying right now just knowing that I know someone who climbed. That's how worried she gets. It's a tragic story, but the leaving of the photo and the climbing in honor of the friend or fellow climber, I think is a nice, wonderful thing to share. And thank you for sharing it. When we come back, we're going to talk the most challenging moment of your ascent. How's that for, right. Don't change that dial kind of sell ahead. We're here with astrobiologist Professor Sarah Rugheimer. She is the Carswell Chair at York University, and check out her book, Searching for Extraterrestrial Life, which is an Audible original, available at audible.com. And I just realized, is it a book or is it's an audiobook?
It's an audio. It's an audio course. There's no written version of it for people to get. It's only the 10-part lectures.
I feel so seen as someone with dyslexia. I really do right now. We'll be back with Sarah in a moment. We are talking about climbing Mount Denali, the highest peak in North America. We're here with Professor Sarah Rugheimer, who's the Carswell Chair at York University and the author of Searching for Extraterrestrial Life. That's an Audible original. You can check out at audible.com. We are talking about your climb, your second attempt at Denali, recently successful. When did you get back?
What was it? July 17th?
June, probably. That makes more sense.
Oh, sorry. Yes, June. We are not in July yet.
Look, I don't know. Maybe you've discovered time machines. Don't know. Okay, so rather recently, we're talking just a few days ago. Well, 8 days ago. Well, no, 9 days ago. It's okay. I don't understand how time works either. Okay, the challenges of the climb. What does it actually look like? Like, what would be the most challenging moment? And for me, as a lay person who's never really done much of climbing, I did once walk up in San Francisco, Lombard Street, very proud of that. That's that winding, iconic street, if you've seen it. What would be like a challenging moment that most people wouldn't realize? I know there's pooping in a can, which you already described, which thank you for describing that, by the way.
Not fun, but people are interested. Like, what do you do? It's like, yeah, it's not glorious.
Physically challenging moment.
Yeah, I think the physically and the mentally challenging kind of go together. Summit day was certainly very difficult, and the day before summit day was emotionally challenging. So I think because, in my last attempt, a teammate died, I was scared, and I freaked out a little. The day before we were about to go to the summit, all those memories came back. I was really concerned about some of the more dangerous parts of summit day because I've been there. I had done almost all of the mountain, like 99% of the mountain before. And there are parts of the climb which are dangerous, especially coming out of high camp. You are on what's called the Autobahn. Not because of how fast you go. It's very slow climbing, but if you fall, it's very difficult to stop the fall. And that's where a large number of deaths have occurred on the mountain. It's the first thing you have to do on summit day for about 2 to 3 hours. And it's the last thing you have to do on summit day to get back safely to high camp. It's a very steep traverse. And I was worried, so I was thinking about all these things, thinking about the different parts of the climb that are dangerous and difficult, and had a little cry in my tent at 17,000 feet, just remembering all of that. And then, in the end, on the day, kind of just was like, well, we're going to put one foot in front of the other and go on. And so the summit day was then very difficult for another reason. We had kind of bad weather. It was our last day possible to summit. It was about the worst weather you could safely still make an attempt, so it was higher winds, a bit colder. And we were like, okay, if the winds don't die down, we're going to have to turn back because of the combination of cold and wind. But indeed, the winds got better through the day, and we continued, and eventually made it to the summit. So that was a wonderful accomplishment. Of course, you are only halfway done with the mountain once you get to the summit.
In my mind, like you get to the summit, okay, it's all smooth sailing, but the description of the Autobahn, it's called, this dangerous area.
Autobahn, yeah.
I don't like the Autobahn's supposed to be a fun German highway, and
it's not fun. It's definitely when you get to the top, it's open water swimming, right? You can only go out so far as you have energy to get back safely to shore. And that's the same thing with climbing. I think 80% of accidents occur on the downhill after summit because people have extended themselves in part. You're tired and you can't just have enough energy to get to the summit. So that is also difficult. So there was a moment on summit day where I was like, I'm not sure I have enough energy to get to the summit and back. I worried about that, but then took a high altitude medication called Diamox, which I was having a little bit of probably just the 20,000 foot air, was a struggle. And yeah, after about an hour, I felt a lot better, and then it was fine. But that was the most difficult part.
The view, you described it as amazing. Can you describe it in a little more detail?
Yeah, so Alaska's huge. For people who have maybe only been in, lower 48 or in much of the world, the mountains are, even in, say, the West Coast, are beautiful. Now just imagine double that. Everything is just massive.
And nothing's there. Nobody's there.
No one's there.
It's not like you got Whistler or like, these ski towns or like a city 100 miles away. There's nothing I'm not a cartographer, but maybe 1 billion miles if I had to guess.
Exactly. Yeah. To the next star in our solar system for sure. It's you're just on this snow ice. All you hear is the crunching of snow beneath your feet. There's avalanches that are going off every day that kind of in the distance that you can see. So you have that rumbling, and you're just surrounded by wilderness and mountains and ice and snow as far as you can tell. And even those mountains are very high and impressive, but then Denali is looming up over them. There's just it's so much bigger. It's one of the most beautiful ranges in the world. People who've climbed all over, including the Himalayas, still say Denali is one of their favorite places to climb. Just really untouched nature, and it's fairly clean, because we keep the mountain clean. There's not a lot of there's no trash up there, and like some of the other places. Yeah,
like Everest, it's a dump. I hear, people just leave their garbage and their equipment all over.
Exactly. So Denali is more pristine, and it's just gorgeous. I'll send you a photo.
Sure.
And for people, if you can Google Denali climb or Denali Summit Ridge, Mount Foraker, these sorts of mountains they're just stunning.
I live in Manhattan. The quiet that you described, I'm craving that quiet right now. There's just this ambient city noise. It gets to you. Would you say the experience of climbing has changed your perspective on life?
Yes, that's partly why I do it. In addition to the health benefits I get from it, there is something, I think in some ways we live too comfortable of a life. We don't really realize how good we have it. And I think climbing for me, like I said, pares back things to the basics. It also, because existing is hard, just your more worries about the world or your job fall away. One moment in particular when I came back into real life, it's like we had gotten off the mountain and I went to, a bathroom for the first time with running water.
Yeah.
And the water was coming over my hands and I was like, wow, that is so cool. Like I hadn't experienced running water for 21 days, and just being able to use soap and water, I was like, this is a miracle. It was kind of like an out of body experience, just recognizing like the conveniences of modern life that we just take for granted. And it was more a physical reality, awe moment than a mental one. I was just like, wow, this water feels so good on my hands. Like I couldn't believe it. It felt like a blessing. And so I do think sometimes it's good to remove the daily comforts of life, and it puts other things into perspective.
I mean, I get a mini version of that every year coming home from Burning Man, the soap, running water, running toilet. I mean, in this case, it's a porta potty and just dirty hippies. It's not,
Yeah.
a difficult climb. But yeah, my last question. Did you encounter any Yetis? Is that a worry? Abominable snow people or snowmen, snow women?
There's nothing living up there. No bears, no insects, no ticks. It's all ice and snow. There's really, truly nothing, which is also why it feels a bit like an alien planet. There's no signs of life. There's no signs of vegetation. There's no signs of microbial life even. It's just barren. And that's also an experience that we often don't get.
Yeah, I suppose if you got dropped on a Class M planet, for those non-nerds, that's a Star Trek planet that like you can live on, that can support life. It would just be an empty, barren wasteland.
Yeah.
Did you feel at all like connected to your work? Like, okay, if there was ever a habitable area in space, it might look like this. It might be quiet like this.
I did think about that, especially the first time I climbed 2 years ago. It felt to me like such an alien landscape, and I thought maybe this is what other planets might look like because they have geological activity and they probably have water and they have water condensing out as snow and ice. But then, if there is life on those planets, it would look very different. And so it did feel a bit alien. But this time I was more just, back for more suffering, and just steeling myself to the reality of being out for 21 days. It was wonderful. It's mountaineers have bad memories, as they say. So it's always miserable while you're doing it, but fun to look back on, and you don't remember all the misery.
That's how I feel about my divorce. Not important. Congratulations on almost getting married. Oh man, I don't know why you agreed to do this. I'm not the best interviewer. Superstitions, rituals. I know you're a scientist. You're a professor. You've done wonderful work. Looking you up before I interviewed you almost intimidated me. But do you get superstitious? Are there little superstitious rituals? Because I know I'm a computer scientist, lowest form of scientist, but and by education. But like I do get superstitious, even though I'm this rational, atheist, whatever kind of person. I do. Do you get those? Do you engage with those?
I don't get superstitious, in the sense that I don't ever buy into those sorts of magical thinking. However, I do think there's an importance in rituals, just for our own physiology and our own brain chemistry. Having those rituals can be really powerful. So, and I don't know if this is a ritual per se, but I always bring, some of my dad's ashes to any summit that I've climbed. And like I brought this photo of Fernando up to the top of Denali. But so those sorts of things, or just kind of the daily ritual of you're going to have your hot drink in your little Nalgene mug and prepare your day, can really help just set the tone of things. But I don't do anything for fear that something bad might happen, or any of that.
I hear that. Maybe I should start thinking of my superstitious stuff as more ritual, because I don't live in fear like that either. Thank you for sharing your story. This was a wonderful interview. I appreciate your time, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
Astrobiologist Sarah Rugheimer is the Carswell Chair at York University, and she's got an Audible original available at audible.com called Searching for Extraterrestrial Life. Earlier in the week, I covered a story about monkeys. Monkeys off the coast of Puerto Rico on a small island that didn't get along, that don't get along, that are monkey jerks. But these macaque monkeys, after Hurricane Maria, did something kind of amazing. After that disaster, they started to get along more. What does this say about us as humans? After all, we're a not-so-distant cousin to the monkeys. That story with someone who did the research on this coming up next. Can a disaster make the antisocial among us get along? That's what appears to have happened amongst some monkeys on an island near Puerto Rico called Monkey Island when Hurricane Maria hit. I'm here to talk with someone who's done research on the matter. Her name is Dr. Camille Testard. She is a neuroscience research fellow at Harvard. Camille, thank you for speaking with me about this today.
Yes, hi. Very happy to be here.
So, macaques. Do they get along? Tell me about the way these monkeys behaved before the hurricane.
Sure. Yeah. So Rhesus macaques are among the most aggressive and hierarchical of monkeys, really, of primates. Every single macaque has its place in the macaque society, and they can be, yeah, like I said, very aggressive with one another, not very tolerant towards each other, not really willing to share. And that's really how it was.
They sound like us, Camille. That you're describing people right now.
Yeah, yeah, there's similarities there, that's for sure. And on Cayo Santiago before the hurricane, that's really how it was. So although, they do form these groups, these large groups that have males and females where they all live together. But each group, even on the island, it has its own hierarchy. And then within the group, there's a hierarchy between each individual. And there's also relationships. So they also form bonds with others that help them navigate this kind of complex society that they live in. But in 2017, Hurricane Maria, I mean, maybe I should back up a little bit and say that this island on which these monkeys live is quite special because it's the longest running primatology field site in the world. These rhesus macaques are actually from Asia. They're from India, the sort of Indian subcontinent mostly. And I mean, they're also in China, more generally Asia. And they were brought by boat from India and released on this island. 400 macaques were brought by boat and released on this island, and they've been living there ever since. And this island, being in the middle of the Caribbean, is regularly hit by hurricanes, by storms that can be more or less violent. In 2017, Hurricane Maria was the worst natural disaster, the worst hurricane on record in Puerto Rico. It led to 3,000 human deaths, more than 3,000 human deaths. No electricity, no water for months. I'm sure a lot of people remember these events. And the worst of the storm, so the strongest winds, passed over this island where these monkeys live.
Were they okay? What happened to them?
Yeah, so I was not part of the team at that time. I joined right after. But what people told me is basically we thought, they're all dead. Nobody survived. It's impossible. They're just a few kilos. Like these winds can just blow them off completely. And about 2 days after the hurricane, we managed actually to send a helicopter to go check out the island and see, like, is there any monkey alive? And from the first footage of the hurricane, to everybody's like amazement, most of them were still there. Most of them were still alive. And in fact, only about 30 individuals out of a population of roughly 1,500 died.
Wow.
On the island. So very few individuals died. Why? We don't really know. How? We don't really know, but they did survive. And now they had to live with this new landscape because the storm completely destroyed the island. All of the monkeys were still there. The infrastructure that was there was gone, that was built by humans. Most of the trees, like over 60% of the vegetation collapsed, was gone after the hurricane. And interestingly, or I guess to the monkeys' dismay, this loss of vegetation has not recovered. So years after the hurricane, even today, 6 years later, there's whole chunks of the island that are basically desertic. There's no more trees when it used to be a lush and green forest.
So they're forced to share tighter quarters now, share space a little more than they were before.
Yeah, exactly. So another important point to mention is that these macaques are part of this primatology center, this primate center. And so, yes, because they're part of this field site and they've been studying for a long time, they're actually provisioned. So they are given food. They're fed basically on a day-to-day basis, on a daily basis. And which means that after the hurricane, the loss of vegetation was not so much a problem for food because they were supplemented for food even before the hurricane. It's really shade that's critical. So that brings me to the second important point about being in the Caribbean is one, there's hurricanes. Two, it's very, very hot. We have temperature loggers on the island, which show temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius under the sun in, every day. It's a very common high temperatures. And so as us humans, we need to lower body temperature. We can't just stay in 40 degrees in the sun, and we suffer in that case. And that suffering can actually lead to physiological damage and health issues. So this is the same case, the same situation for these macaques, which now have way less shade to access. So yes, they have to, especially during these hot hours of the day, access to shade is really important to them.
So you've got these aggressive monkeys that didn't really share before. You've got this change in the landscape, this necessity to share. There's less shade. And what did you expect to happen versus what did you find?
Yeah, so what we expected to happen was that we would see more competition because there's less resources, and so more aggression between members of the group, between cliques within the group, and perhaps maybe more bonding, but with your very close friends and partners that can help you deal with the more increased competition to sort of support each other in this more competitive landscape. So we thought maybe they'll be more invested in their best friends and then be more aggressive towards the rest. But what we saw was really completely different. In fact, the society became overall more tolerant, less aggressive. They spend more time in close contact with each other. They expanded their network of individuals that they interacted with and shared more. So it was really kind of the opposite direction from what we expected based on this species.
Were you surprised by this?
Yeah, very surprised. I mean, the first people that were the most surprised were the researchers on the ground who collected data from, this study compiles 10 years of data. I got there for some of the last years, but you consider the whole timeline. I wasn't necessarily there, but some people have been there the whole time studying the same macaques all these years. And they told me, day one, things are different. They're less aggressive. They interact with other monkeys they never used to tolerate before. There's something's completely changed. And so they were the most surprised. They communicated that to us. And then we, looked into it. And indeed, it was a very big difference in their social interactions.
Do you think there's broader implications here with your findings as it relates to animal behavior in response to natural disasters? Maybe primates, maybe mammals, just animals in general. When there's a disaster, Do you think that this can be extrapolated to say that animals may well band together?
Yeah, I think what this study shows is that, well, until now, people have thought, well, the way that animals can adjust potentially to environmental change is perhaps morphology. Like they could, for example, there was a study showing that lizard with longer tails were able to better hang on to branches to hold on to bigger winds of hurricanes. That individuals could use perhaps physiological changes, like some species can adjust their body temperature, or they can just leave perhaps, and so move it to some another location. But the fact that they could actually use their social relationships to be resilient to withstand those big environmental changes, that's sort of the novelty here, which is that my social connections can be one of the tools that animal, or in general, social connections can be one of the tools that animals can use to be resilient in the face of environmental disasters.
So we're mammals too, we're primates too. As climate change happens, hopefully it can be reversed. Hopefully it's not a worst case scenario. Does this mean that existential threat to humans may cause us to actually get along better before complete environmental collapse happens and we all die anyway?
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope. That's certainly the hope. I think that there's a lot of evidence out there that when shit hits the fan, when things go very wrong.
You are the second scientist to swear on my show today. Another was an astrobiologist, another doctor. I love it. I'm so happy with this. When shit hits the fan, what happens?
Yeah. When shit hits the fan, there's been, documented stories of humans banding together and helping each other, including individuals who don't know each other. So this is actually something that we do observe in humans in these very extreme cases. What's different, I think, in this case is that things didn't go back to normal. So in humans, usually when there's a disaster, pretty quickly, we rebuild, we bring things back together so that in a few years, things are almost like they were before. So there's kind of a return back to the norm. And the banding together and the supporting each other also goes back to normal. Here with these monkeys, it didn't go back to normal. Years after, it's still very different ecosystem. They still have to share much less shade than they had before. And so this leads to this really sustained change, societal change in this population. So I do think that this, brings some hope that if things go wrong and don't revert back to what they used to be, which is kind of the direction in which we're going, we will be able to adjust through our social relationships. And that's going to be a very important tool that we can use to adjust.
So aliens, if you can hear this, come attacked, but don't attack so bad that, we can't defend ourselves. Camille, thank you for talking to me about these monkeys. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here.
Camille Testard is a neuroscience research fellow at Harvard. All right, it's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. Coming up next with therapist and social worker Gary Direnfeld. And at the break, I'm going to call Gary an old motherfucker because him and I are going to talk about aging. If you want to hear how Gary responds to my expletive, don't change that dial. I have to stop saying that. Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday with therapist, social worker, man about town, Gary Direnfeld. Gary, welcome as always. I love speaking to you.
Good to be with you again, David. Does anyone ever call you Dave, or is everyone calling you David?
I don't like Dave. However, I went by Dave up until I was about 20. And so I'm resigned to it with my family because they're the kind of narcissists where you're like, call me a new name. And they're just like, no. And then some of my oldest friends will call me Dave. And it's fine. I just tolerate it. But my only issue is when my old friends, like I have a friend, Dan, and when he introduces me to his friends, because we don't live in the same city, now, like he came to New York 3 months ago, and he introduced me to someone in New York, and now they call me Dave, even though I just met them. It doesn't matter. I'm just ranting. But no, I don't like Dave, in case you're wondering.
Okay. Well, I've never called you that. I've always called you David.
It's okay.
I've never even asked. And I do like to ask, actually. People have preferences.
People have a right to be called the name they want to be called. And
you think?
You shouldn't be too upset, because before the break, I said it lovingly, but I did call you an old motherfucker. You were talking about looking in the mirror and
I know, I resemble that remark.
You are spry to me. And Martin Short, 70, just guest hosted Jimmy Kimmel show. I guess Jimmy Kimmel's on vacation or whatever.
Okay.
He plays a character that he's been playing for many years, Ed Grimley.
Oh, great character. One of his longtime characters.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he did an interview with Bill Hader, and Bill Hader was dying. Like, Bill Hader couldn't even speak. He couldn't even, let alone be funny. And Bill Hader is a very funny guy. Martin Short was so quick. I'm like, if that guy's like that at 70, I can never complain that I feel like I'm slowing down, because that's just me. That's just excuses. That's just me getting in my own head for not being sharp enough, not working hard enough. There are so many reasons why we aren't as sharp as we'd like to be. Aging, maybe it's a small one, but it's just that, a small one.
I do feel sharp. And as a clinician, as a social worker, as a therapist, I feel like my skills of observation are as good as they've ever been. Like, I think, like, I watch people in front of me and I pick up every nuance. But having said that, I do feel like you nailed it, an old motherfucker. I look at myself in the mirror, recognizing all those nuances, and I see, like, I hold myself differently. My posture is different. My gait is different. I don't recognize the person staring back at me. When the hell did I get old? David, help me.
I feel the same way. I just turned 38, and this morning I'm like, I got to shave because
my beard.
Well, yeah, but my beard's growing in gray. The side of my head's growing in gray. I got my first gray pubic hair like 6 months ago.
Okay, that's a rite of passage. I went gray early up top. And then when I saw my first gray, Arlene, come here, look at this. And she's, I've seen it before. No, not that.
Oh, I didn't call Miranda in. I just got on my tweezers. And I don't know, in the grand taxonomy of hairs that you can tweeze, you got your eyebrow hairs, which don't hurt at all. You got your nose hairs, which hurt a fair amount. And then you got your pubes. And those kill. Those are not fun to tweeze. But I did it, and it's gone. And there's no new one yet.
Okay, you killed that one, soldier.
I mean, I used to do it with my beard. It's an arms race
You're
that you
going
don't
through
win.
the change, David.
I know.
I'm happy if I've got a few black hairs down there.
I'm happy if you got them too, Gary.
So this is age. This is aging.
Yeah.
This is like I didn't get the memo. And I feel myself changing. If my mother hears this podcast, it's going to be a riot because she turned 100 a couple of weeks ago.
She's like, what are you complaining about? You're 68.
Exactly. It's all relative. But yeah, I feel the difference. I see the difference. And then I sit back and I think, wow. Like how do younger persons, when I say younger persons, people like yourself, when they look at me, what age of man do they see? And how do they think of this person?
That's a good question. I can't help you there because I am not ageist. Like I've always had friends that are much older than me. One of my closest friends is 75. We met doing stand-up, I think when she was 68. And I got friends in their early 20s. I'm friends with this one comedian we met when she was 19.
I'm the same way. I have friends across the age span.
Yeah. However, there are those that kind of keep within the age band. And I think the question's better asked to those folks. I'm not like one of these people. It's like, age is just a number. I don't know. I get that as you grow older, you should be more responsible. If only because you've amassed that responsibility. I got bills to pay. I got a mortgage to pay. I got a kid to take care of. But other than that, no, I don't really believe there's anything in age.
I'll tell you, I don't feel settled in my ways. Some people use their age as an excuse to remain stagnant, to not change, to not be flexible of mind, if not of body. Yeah, for me, age is not an excuse to be to no longer be self-reflective, open to learning. And you know what? I attribute that to my mother because she's still open to learning and she's very flexible of mind.
She's a spry 100-year-old. I've seen videos of you and her talking. She's as sharp as anyone.
It's true. It's true. And so, to those who are listening to this podcast of any age, hopefully remain flexible of mind and open to learning. I started volunteering a couple of months ago at a regional hospital near us where I had my cardiac surgery. I am administration facing, not patient facing. So my volunteer work is with admin to offer a patient's perspective on programs and services that they provide. And I think that's also important, truly at any age, but I think more so as we get older, to keep us young at mind, involved, active. And so I'm saying all this, yet I'm that old motherfucker that you spoke about right off the top.
Volunteering's great. I think it's a wonderful way to spend one's time. But I think the wider thing here to kind of keep young is to engage in activities where you're interfacing with new people, different kinds of people. Could be a class, could be a workout group.
Well, also, we were talking about where I live and the weather. And then I said, I want to get out on the water on our Sea-Doo.
Oh, my God.
And that surprised you.
Yeah, I'm 30. I'm literally 30 years your junior, and I won't get on a Sea-Doo. That sounds terrifying.
And not only that, it's kind of a high performance Sea-Doo, and I've had high performance boats. So my alter ego is going hell bent for in rough water.
Your morning thrill.
It really, and my wife is there beside me or behind me if it's on the Sea-Doo. And she's right along there with me. So we get our yayas out that way and have some excitement.
My first therapist ever. I was 18, 17. I just flunked out of school. I was not in a great place. I guess that's not relevant to the story. He's an older guy. He must have been in his 70s then. He's probably dead now.
Wow.
Jerry was his name. One morning I'm late to my therapy appointment, so I'm borrowed my sister's car and I drove there. And this guy driving in a 3 Series convertible cuts me off, kind of runs a red light. And as he's running the red light to make the left-hand turn or whatever, I see it's him, my therapist, Jerry. And so I say something to him when and he's a very, very sweet older guy, gray hair. I mean, he doesn't remind me of you because you guys are very different personalities, but it's the same warm, older, happens to be Jewish.
Therapist, you think calm, sedate.
So I confront him and he goes bright red in the face and he's like, "You caught me. It was my morning thrill." He's like, "You caught me during my morning thrill." Anyway, whenever I think of elderly Jewish people doing, power sports or being aggro on the water or having a fast ski or whatever it is, I think of the morning thrill.
I like using my age with the people that I serve. I met with a couple, what's today? Wednesday. So earlier this week, and they're in their 40s. Here I am, 68. And I feel sometimes paternal to persons of that age and younger. So I feel like I could be their father. And, by age, I certainly could be. And I admit it to them. I say, look, I really like you. You're a lovely couple, and they truly were. I feel I'm going to give you some guidance that is kind of fatherly. And I hope that doesn't offend you, but I'm that much older than you, and I do have a paternal perspective sometimes. And so I'm just going to talk to you as if, and I know I'm not your father. And by the way, I knew what their fathers were like.
It's what drove them to therapy. If there weren't for bad fathers, you'd be out of business.
There you go. But let's pretend I'm a different father, and here's what I would tell you. And so that's how we proceeded. But I think they actually appreciated my coming from that place, because truly it was genuinely caring and coming from a place of caring and concern.
When we come back, a salacious topic change. We're going to talk about how people of a bit older age interface with those very young in a way that I'm not too crazy about. Spanking. I feel like that's a topic that always turns the newspaper pages. We'll be back with Gary. What? It's a topic whiplash. That's what this is, Gary.
All righty.
Gary Direnfeld is here. We'll be back with more of him. We are back. It's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. Gary Direnfeld is here. He's a social worker. Check him out at yoursocialworker.com. He's got great writings there. He's got a Facebook page with something like 20, 30,000 likes, but then about 10,000 less followers. Or maybe it's the other way around.
No,
yeah, the people don't like you, but they follow you. I think
it's around 23 and change likes, and then also around 23,000 followers. My legions of followers. I got to tell you, my Facebook page is quite a safe page. I monitor it like a hawk. If somebody makes a comment that is off color, that's racist, mis or disinformation, it's wiped often within minutes, if not, an hour or so. And so the people who follow me typically feel quite safe posting their comments and being supportive of one another. I really feel good about my Facebook page. Gary Direnfeld, social worker.
Do you know about Godwin's Law or Godwin's Rule? It's an amazing rule that some lawyer made up in the 90s. He said that as an online discussion group grows longer and larger, the probability of somebody bringing up the Nazis or Hitler approaches 100%. Yeah, the internet can be a cesspool, can it? I mean, it also can be a wonderful, safe place.
It can. But that's why I monitor it as closely as I do. And I'm forever posting things that hopefully are helpful to people's family, parenting, relationships, mental health.
Okay, let's talk parenting. Spanking. I feel like this is a topic we haven't covered by now, but I feel like we've covered it 1,000 times. But let's actually do it. I feel like I see a meme going around the internet every now and again saying that spanking's okay, or I survived the belt, therefore it's fine. And it's like, no, sorry.
Right. And as soon as I see that meme, I was spanked and I turned out okay. I like, let me give you a second opinion. Right?
I get that in other cultures it's the norm, and if you're an immigrant, like I get there's reasons why it happens, but there's no excuse for it.
But even then, people don't realize the insidious nature of spanking on psychological, mental health, and relationships.
Yeah.
There is, as soon as you're spanking, you're using power and authority, one's will to impose over the other, and it's corporal punishment, it's physical. And that alters the person engaged in that practice, and it alters the thinking and the experience of the person on the receiving end, even if it's a young child. And it teaches might is right, even if you're wielding it supposedly for a good cause. So I'm not talking so much about one's intent. I'm not here to hurt you, son or daughter, and this is going to hurt you more than it hurts me. The intent is off. I'm not talking about the abuser who's beating the shit out of their kids. I'm just talking about using corporal punishment and wanting people to know that the degree to which that gets used, kids then feel that doing similar is okay. And so you'll see kids hit other kids. Well, yeah, it's being role modeled for them. You will see kids try and use power and control kids. Once they're older, young adults using power and control tactics in their relationships. Might is right. And it does affect how we interact with others. And so, let me give you that second opinion. The very fact that you would share that meme is coming from a place of self-righteousness with respect to that behavior. So by the very fact that you're sharing that meme, you are demonstrating to me that you've been adversely affected. Okay, it may not be the worst effect in the world, for each individual, but do we need it at all when there are other more positive ways of managing children's behavior? There's my rant.
No, it's a good rant, and just because you feel like you turned out okay doesn't mean that you should be an apologist for this stuff. Doesn't mean you should be telling everyone, well, I turned out fine, therefore it's fine. That's kind of a fallacious argument.
Yeah, what a logical fallacy that one is. I did it, I'm good, therefore it's good for everyone else. No, many people survive food poisoning. Why would you want to wish that on someone else just because you survived it? No, it's not good for everyone else.
My brother used to smack me a lot, but he hasn't done it in a while. It's at least been a week. No, I'm kidding. He hasn't hit me in 25 years, but when I was a kid, I would constantly get slugged by my brother. And even now, as a 38-year-old adult, when someone abruptly raises their fist around me, not even in a violent manner, maybe it's like to grab a picture of something, or maybe it's, I don't know, a bug came near them and they, kind of actively swat their hand or whatever it is, I instinctively flinch. It's still there.
It's triggering.
I mean, there are many ways in which I'm traumatized by my upbringing, which is the short version of why I do this show. It's the short version of why I'm a performer.
You want my therapy. I get it. That's okay.
It's sublimation, right? The kid who gets, who's a bully as a kid, if they want to turn out okay, they become a boxer. Or the kid who doesn't get enough attention becomes a performer or a comedian or a radio host. You know what I'm saying? I have my things that were not so great about my childhood. My brother hitting me, I don't know if I sort of put that in that pile, but it has had a lasting psychological effect on me.
Yeah, and that's different from what we're implying in the conversation on spanking. That is abuse of you by your brother. There's no way he should be whacking on you. Coming back to the issue of spanking.
No, I know you feel like I got off topic, but what I'm saying is any form of spanking can like have a subconscious triggers now that you're creating.
Well, yeah, it's something we carry with us. And here's the thing. There are so many alternatives, and people equate, well, if I can't spank, you're telling me I can't discipline my kids. No, you can still hold your kids accountable, but you don't need to do it through whacking them. You can, if you want, you can time them out. You can take away an object. You can, we call that a response cost, or you can chat with them for goodness sakes and say, look, that behavior is disappointing. You're better than that, sweetheart. What is going on for you that you think that's going to work and that's the way to go? So you can have those conversations. And the key for the parent is to enter into that with a sense of empathy, curiosity, yet you can still be firm and clear and unequivocal with respect to what isn't acceptable. And then you do some problem solving with the kid. That is the nature of discipline. Discipline literally means to teach. And with whatever it is you do with your kids, you got to consider, what are you teaching?
Oh, yeah. Discipline. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. To teach.
What is that word? Etymology. That's the meaning of a word.
Correct.
What about people who say, okay, it's just like the culture of my family. It's fine. I'm going to do it to my kids. My parents did it to me. How do you sort of stop that cycle of?
Well, first of all, I don't argue with people about their values and belief systems. Rather, we'll talk about what was the impact for you. Are there some times where you wish they would have done something differently? What alternatives do you see as being available to you? So I'm not saying don't do it, but what can you do as an alternative? Very often people resort to spanking because they don't have an alternative. They don't think in those terms. So rather than telling a person what not to do, because telling a person what not to do doesn't teach them what to do. So I like to spend my time on giving alternatives to spanking so they at least have some things that they can do differently. And then at their discretion, they can try them out. And because I'm not shaming the person and arguing and putting them down for their beliefs and values, they tend to be more open to the information and conversation.
Gary, It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. From one old fart to a young whippersnapper.
You're an old fart now. I thought you were an old motherfucker, but hey.
An old motherfucker.
Times change. Gary, it's always a pleasure. You can find more about Gary. Find out more about Gary at yoursocialworker.com. It's Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. What more to say? Seriously, Gary, what more to say?
I love you. Have a good week.
Oh, I love you too, buddy. All right, coming up next, in a small town north of London, England, where our foreign correspondent Tony Five lives, there is a national emergency. They have lost power. And in the streets, pandemonium. Reporting live from the scene with a cell phone that's about to die, I have on the line Tony Five. So you're going to hear about all that chaos in the streets coming up next. It's breaking news here on This Is Going Well, I Think, with David Cooper, and there is a heat wave in the United Kingdom near London. There is power outages, mass pandemonium, and we go to our foreign correspondent, Tony Five, who's right in the middle of it. Tony, welcome.
David, this is Tony. I come to you from my bedroom in the dark, David.
I understand that people are really suffering. The last update I got, your phone only has 16% battery during a power outage. How will you survive?
14%, David. 14% now.
My God, we're getting an update from the wires. Tony's phone has 14%. Tony, how are you going to survive?
No idea, David. it feels hard. It's been about 27 minutes since it happened. Food's running low, water's running low. People are out on the streets, David. There's been looting, there's been rioting. I'm having to eat all the stuff in my fridge just in case.
And when you say there's no water, the plumbing is still working, correct?
I don't think electricity controls the plumbing supply, but I will check for you shortly.
I hope to hear a toilet flush in the near future, just to confirm that you do in fact have running water, although I know water is running low because electricity and water are actually the same thing. That's what they don't teach you about in school.
Correct.
What will happen? You have a place north of London. It's a small neighborhood. Do neighbors get together and band together during a crisis like this?
I've suggested that we all go outside and sing Kumbaya. Not a lot of them want to do it. They don't know the song or the words. There's a lot of old people here. I think most of them think they've already died because they're woken up and it's dark. There is some young people here as well. There's no lights in the courtyard, so I live in an old school, essentially, conversion. So I can see it's all pitch black. So we usually have sort of courtyard lights, and you can see people's lights on, but there's nothing at the moment. I can see 2 candles. Again, I don't know whether one of my older neighbours is having a romantic date night or whether they're actually in response to the power outage. As I look around, I walked up to the street earlier on, just before I spoke to you. It does look like it's along the street and not just my development, but we do have a mains converter just down the road. So I'm assuming it's overheated because it was very warm today. English people and in general, the West, we cannot handle the heat here. Everything falls apart. Our infrastructure falls apart. We don't have air conditioning. We complain when it's raining. We complain when it's sunny. We complain all the time, basically.
You said a mains converter? I think in here we call that a switching station. That's when the power goes from high to low for the neighborhood?
I made it up, David. I'll be honest with you. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Fair enough. Breaking news, we are getting reports that Tony's phone is onto 13%. How will he survive?
11.
My goodness. Breaking news, Tony's phone is down to 11%.
Correct.
I've heard a rumor that when your phone dies, you die. Do you intend to find out, or will you be charging your phone in the car?
This is apparently what Steve Jobs' legacy was. When everybody's iPhone dies, we all die at the same time, joining him in Apple, the metaverse, apparently, which is what he wanted to do, right?
Yeah, Apple is definitely the maker of the metaverse, definitely. How will you get your evening thrill? You know, when you sit down at your computer with a box of tissues and you watch Tony's special videos over the internet, you won't be able to do that.
Now, David, I already thought of that. And a little project that you didn't know is that every night I draw a little picture and I have a pornographic flick book.
Hand-drawn pornographic images is what you've got stockpiled?
100%, my friend. So what I will do is I will sit, I will lay back, I will think of England, and I will flick away, David.
The Queen's dead, Tony. How dare you?
I know.
What about the old-fashioned way? You could go to the bodega, as we call it here in New York, the corner shop, as you might call it, and buy some old-fashioned print nudity.
Do they still do print nudity? Is Playboy still published? Bodegas, because obviously I live outside of London, there isn't much open sort of after 8, 9 o'clock. So it's not like London where it's a 24-hour city. This is quite simply a 3-hour village. Not many people do anything past maybe 1 or 2 o'clock. They do outdoor bowls. I think somebody fell over once, and that was like a front page news story. There's not a lot happening locally where I am.
Well, what do you think will happen if the power stays out, I don't know, 2 days, 5 days, 1 week?
I think it will be a few hours. If it isn't by the morning, there will be civil unrest. A lot of the old people take to the streets, complain, and wish Winston Churchill was back. They'll probably have flashbacks of the war. I presume they've mostly got PTSD. It's a difficult time for the old people at the moment. It's not only hot, but, you know, they haven't got access to their pipes or their slippers because they can't see them.
Now, civil unrest in a London suburb.
9%, David, 9%.
Breaking news, Tony's phone is at 9%. Will he make it to the end of this interview? That is the great question we will hope to answer, and we'll keep you posted with that answer in just a few minutes. Old people in a suburb of London, civil unrest. Does that mean they just refuse to take their tea? And now that I think about it, nobody's going to be taking any tea because your kettles don't work, do they?
Correct, David. There is no tea at the moment. One of the biggest issues we have here with power cuts is, number one, no tea. Number two, no TV. So we rely really on the TV and the tea here. They're kind of mutually exclusive, I guess, is the terminology for it. And like the Venn diagram, you know what that is, don't you? So you've got the people, you've got the tea, you've got the TV. Right in the middle of it, you've got an old English person. It falls apart when all of these things happen. Thankfully, it's not in the middle of winter, or we'd have definitely lost a few overnight.
Wow. Frostbite, it's a real thing. Are the people in the neighborhood, like, who will you complain about during a power outage? Is there a specific utility company where you're like, oh, those people, here it's Con Edison, you're like, oh, those jerks at Con Ed. Who will you be complaining about?
Well, strangely, we all have different service providers, but that come off the same network. So you'd have to really blame the infrastructure rather than the service provider, if that makes sense. So we obviously all pay different service or utility providers here. So I'm with a provider called Octopus Energy. Sounds strange, but it's true. My neighbours are with British Gas, and who provide gas and electricity. There's another one called EDF, which is the French company. But it all obviously goes through the same lines, right? They all provide supply. It's just privatized, and who does it, and they charge different things and so on and so forth. So it comes under the energy supplier, which is who we've all called on our mobiles earlier on, and they're sort of trying to text updates now. 7%, David, 7%.
I totally stopped listening to you. I had no idea what you were talking about. It was boring. 7%, breaking news. Tony's phone down to 7%. Will he make it just one more minute on this call? That is the cliffhanger that you have to look forward to as we get through this disaster north of London. A small area has lost power, mostly with old people. There are really no consequences at all. Everybody's fine, but people also are dying in the streets, aren't they, Tony?
Dying in the streets. It's become martial law here. There are many. I feel it's like Britain's Rodney King.
But instead of, riots in the streets of LA, it's, those guards that stand out of Buckingham Palace with the crazy suits hitting everybody with canes, I imagine.
It's not even that. We're all just sat indoors, sitting on our phones.
Yeah, but your phones are about to die.
Correct. And then that is when shit gets real, David.
That's when mass pandemonium happens.
Correct. It will be like, there's a film, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like absolute hell. It's one night of the year where they can all go and kill each other. I can't remember what the name of it is. It's a famous film. It's like a horror film, and they go out, and it's one night of the year where you can go out and murder's legal, and the culling, is it, or the curfew, or Bambi? I can't remember. It was one of them films basically where it happens and it all goes tits up.
Sorry, I wasn't listening again. Breaking news: Tony's electricity is down to what percent on your phone?
4%, David. 4% at the moment.
My goodness, Tony, I don't know what you will do. Will you update me without a phone telepathically like we practiced on drugs the other day?
Yes, we did. And there's a couple of things I wanted to tell you if I don't make it this time. So what I've done is, over the last few years, as we've spoken, I've put some money aside that I wish to use for you in your adventure, and I've got some content. I have a little black book that I keep of all our latest radio contacts, people that you can speak to improve your career, to do everything you need to get the listeners in. And I've put it somewhere, I've hidden it. And the code that I've used, really, David, is 76.
There he goes. Tony dropped off. I guess we'll never know, because his phone died. And there you have it. A disaster north of London. A small area where Tony lives has lost power. Up next, our intern, Zach Zhang, just graduated from broadcasting school. So I'm going to have him on to wish him a Merry Christmas or Happy Graduation or whatever. And also, we'll talk about making friends using apps. Zach Zhang up next. We are here with the show's intern, Zach Zhang. Zach, welcome.
Thank you, David. I feel very welcome every time you bless me with your beautiful voice on the show.
Wow. Blessed with a beautiful voice. blessed with beautiful vocal boards. I don't know, vocal cords. I was going for the alliteration. You graduated yesterday. Congratulations.
I did graduate. Thank you, David. It was a fun time. It was nice seeing all the props that made me who I am today, who inspired me to get on this career path. There was great people. Met some old friends again before they inevitably move out of the country or go on their own path. So it was nice seeing them all one more time. The only thing I didn't like was the commute, because I had to go all the way from uptown to downtown, which was not fun at all.
And when they saw you and they found out you were working on this internationally renowned show, they were so proud of you. They thought you graduated and now things are happening for you in ways they couldn't imagine.
Exactly.
Wow. So you get up there, you got the hat, you have the robe, are you wearing the whole getup?
We actually did not have the hat. I don't know if they just cheaped out or if it's like a thing now because they didn't want people throwing the hats. But we were given red gowns, or because Seneca is red, Seneca proud. Let's go. But otherwise, that was it. It was just a red zip-up gown. It made me feel very powerful. I felt like a wizard. I was ready to ponder some orbs, you know.
Oh, that's all. That's it. That's
all. Yeah, that's all. If you wanted me to talk more about the convention, I'm gonna be real. There wasn't much. In the beginning, there were quote-unquote refreshments, which is just water. Maybe one of the tubs occasionally got some cucumber slices, orange slices. And after that, more water and some soft cookies that were actually pretty good. I was hoping for some sandwiches maybe, but that was it. Some water and cookies.
Water, cookies, and orange slices. I feel like... Wow. And they're worried you're going to throw the hats at each other? Like someone's going to lose an eye because of the pointy edges?
I suppose. I feel like that's happened before. I feel like I've heard some posts about that happening, and maybe they're just taking a stand against it, which is fair enough, but I feel like that's a little bit too soft. You know what I mean? That like, we were still able to do that when I was in high school, and that was only like, what? Oh, wait. That was like
don't
5 years ago.
Don't.
Oh, no.
Please don't. I'm old, dude.
Oh, no.
I used to be young. Oh, my God.
Well,
you know when it really happened for me, Zach? You're what, 20?
I'm 23 now.
23.
I'm 24. Yeah, I'm 23.
So I got married at 26, not too much older than you. I got divorced at 27. And I would tell everyone I'm divorced, and everyone would always be like, you're too young to be divorced. And then about 3 years ago, when I started being like, my ex-wife this, I'm divorced that, people would just nod at me. They would never say you're too young to be divorced, and that's when I knew.
You know what? I like to think that time is relative, so it's okay. As long as you don't think you're old, you're not old, you know?
You're right. I don't think I'm old. I know I'm old.
It's like what you told me a little bit before recording. You still have the mind of a child.
Thank you. I don't know if that's an insult or a compliment.
You can take that however you want it.
I'll take it both ways. Now, let's go through some stories. There's a story in the Globe and Mail, well-known national newspaper in Canada, about apps that aren't designed for dating, but are designed for making new pals. And I have experience with these kinds of apps, and before you make fun of me for being a loser, let me tell you what happened. Bumble. It's a dating app. Have you heard of it? Swipe left, swipe right.
I'm familiar with Bumble.
Okay, they have a BFF mode, and I was doing like late night appearances on my friend Jim Richards' I hate when names end with S's, show, I don't know, 3 years ago, and we got in this competition to see who could make a friend faster that would appear on the radio show, and then whose friend would be better. And so I made a friend, this guy in New York named Sam, and I forget who Jim's friend was. Jim's friend sung with him on his appearances, so by all records, it was more flashy, but my friend Sam was super deep. Like, we actually became buddies. We would go for coffee, then he got deported or something. Now he lives in the UK, but I've done this.
Was there a reason for his deportation? I'm kind of curious.
Well, he, like me, was a foreign national. He's from India, and he lost his job, or I think after he was going to fashion school, and he got like an internship, and then it didn't turn into a job. And then his visa was about to expire, and rather than deal with the stress of all that, I think he got a good job in London, England, so he's just like, I'll go there. Why not? So that's what happened. So he didn't get deported. He just, he followed the work.
It was just unfortunate circumstances that...
But I used to be in that boat. I used to be on a visa where if I got fired or lost my job or quit, I had like 30 or maybe 60 days to find a new job, or that's it. I'm out, gone.
Yeah, I can only imagine how stressful that is.
It was. Do you have experience with these apps? Have you made friends?
I I think the only experience I've ever had with these apps was one back in high school. I wouldn't say it was meant for dating. Like it specifically promoted itself as a friendship app, but God forbid what people were actually doing with the apps back in the day. But I think it was called Yellow or something.
Yellow?
Maybe, yeah, something like that. It had yellow colors for sure, reminiscent of Bumble, but I'm almost certain it was called Yellow or something like that. It was pretty much the same thing. Just swipe left, right. If you get matched, you just talk.
Talk online though. It was more like online friend kind of thing, or in person friend kind of thing.
It was more like an online thing, unless but I guess they did have location and distance parameters that you could search by, so it could potentially link up to like a real life thing. I'm pretty sure most people would take the text off of Yellow and go onto Instagram or iMessage or something like that.
I'm looking at the app now. It's kind of creepy because the big banners that advertise the user interface, like on the App Store, it's like, I mean, I don't even want to say they're attractive because they're so young, but it's like attractive girls aged 16. And I'm like, your target audience is creeper older dudes. I'm like, this is what I'm thinking here.
Yeah, that's definitely what's probably being used for. Just like Kick back in, well, right now, probably. Are you aware of what Kick is?
Yeah, I don't even know what Kick is.
Kick is like this, I would call it like, are you aware of what Telegram is?
Yeah, it's like a secure chat.
Imagine like a worse Telegram, not secure at all, ran mainly by a bunch of pedophiles, I guess, or used mainly by a bunch of pedophiles. Basically, it's gone to shit. It's gone to shit, that's all.
So it's like Kinder, which would be Tinder for pedophiles. And if you don't get that joke, that's maybe the best joke I've ever written, because Kinder, it means child in German.
Yes, I'm aware.
And it rhymes with Tinder. Come on, anyone? Okay, fine. It wasn't that funny.
In my soul, I'm laughing, but I just needed to put on a strong face for you.
No, it's all right. This is why I don't do stand-up anymore. So what do you make of these apps? Like, do you have friends who use them? Would you ever use them?
I have a lot of friends that use these types of apps. And you know what? I guess just from an outsider view, and maybe it's just these specific people because they're not like doing things wrong or anything, but it seems pretty successful. I have a friend who's actually been quite socially awkward for some time, and he's finally got it in himself to go out there, make some new friends, try to meet some new people. He also downloaded a dating app. I forgot which one. It's one of the most popular ones. Is there one called Hinge?
Hinge, yeah, that's like one of them. Hinge.
Yeah, I think that's the one he's using right now, and they're actually dating right now. So I'm very happy for him because it's probably been something he's been looking for. So, so that's one. Another friend, similar situation. For him, I don't know if it's going well, but he doesn't seem depressed about it. That's all I'm saying. He's talking to new people. He's talking to new girls. They don't hit it off sometimes. They do hit it off sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't last forever. But I think it's just because he might be hooked up on like a previous thing. But I'm not too sure about the full details, so I'm not going to say more about that.
Should we renew the competition and go on the apps and see who can find the better friend, invite them on the show? Are you up for that challenge?
Maybe we can do that. Just download a bunch of dating apps to make friends in particular. Bring them on the show.
If you want to do it, there's this app mentioned in the article that I was talking about earlier called Peanut, which is for women looking to connect while navigating fertility, pregnancy, motherhood, and menopause. Maybe you could start there.
Yeah, so this was something that happens in Toronto. This girl named Sarah Singh basically used this type of dating app to actually just meet other women to hold like networking meetings, but not like focused on substance like career, but more like substance like friendship based hobbies, what they do in their daily type of day. Because living in Toronto, and of course you living in New York, you probably know the economic struggles living in the big cities and stuff like that. Inflation, prices are getting high. People are only talking about career, business, money, and that just places a lot of stress on people, you know? I think there's been a lack of focus on friendship, especially following the pandemic. Even mentioning in the article here, the focus on friendship on reconnection follows a pandemic that put isolation on our collective radar.
Zach, you're just reading the article to me. You're just reading the article.
I don't know what else do you want me to do? You want me to talk about the article?
We're out of time, so we should just leave it at that.
Oh, were we?
Oh, you're great, man. Thank you for doing this. Let's shelve the competing friend thing, but maybe come back to it next week.
Sure, but if there's anything that I want people to take away from this article, just at the end of the day, we need to put more focus on building more meaningful social connections and not just ones that are more career oriented, because there's only so much of that can be healthy for our mind, right? We need more meaningful connections. We need more things that bring happiness to our lives rather than things that potentially bring more stress and more things like comparisons, negative comparisons and doubts into our lives.
And just like that, you've given the show a narrative, a plot line, a moral, an outlook, and meaning. And I appreciate that, Zach. Thanks for your time.
This is why I'm an intern. Thank you, David.
That is our show. Thank you for listening. I'll be here tomorrow. And don't change that dial. Actually, do change the dial. And who uses a dial anymore?